निवासिनि विष्णुविलासिनि जिष्णुनुते.
Hi guys, have you all noticed that a lot of the times when leftists, liberals, Marxists, in general anti-Hindu people recommend a solution to a problem in a tone that as if they discovered lighting for the first time in the world, a lot of time what they're doing is just reinventing the wheel. Reinventing the wheel is a metaphor for someone has already invented a wheel, you make up a wheel of your own and you think, oh see, I made a wheel. No one else thought of it. So that happens mostly in the philosophy culture front, where people these days recommend a lot of things who are opposed to Hindus and Hinduism in general, but they end up recommending things that have been said in Hindu texts or were practiced in Hindu culture forever, at least in the pre-colonial era, in the ancient times, etc. One example comes to mind is obviously that we should treat everyone with respect. All cultures are equal, or that everyone should be treated with some respect, and no one should just thinking of beating the other person up on their own for no apparent reason. Don't be the first perpetrator, don't be the first one to lift the weapon. Be accepting of immigrants, etc. These are the ideas that Hinduism has practiced forever. And I have given this example earlier as well, that I have a friend who is opposed to everything the Hindutva movement is talking about and doing these days on the culture front. He has no problems with capitalism. He disagrees with Hindutva on culture. So I asked him, what's your opinion of God? My friend said, I don't believe anyone is up there noting down what good things I did in my life or on the day. But I do believe there's a higher consciousness who is superior to my consciousness and is probably taking care of things. So I said, see, this is Aurobindo's book. That entire book is about this consciousness, this concept, and it's based on Rig Veda, which was written 6,000 to 7,000 years ago. And he says, what? Oh, this concept exists in Eastern faiths, in Hinduism. So you see, a lot of Hindu concepts have obviously been stolen, misappropriated. A lot of intellectual property theft has happened, which are now being sold as phenomenal and innovative back to stupid and suicidal Hindus who don't get it, that it was their wisdom to begin with. Yoga is obviously another example. But anyway, I got to thinking more about this in context to my recent introspection on decoloniality versus individualism. Obviously, Kushal Mehra needs to be mentioned here because he has been a fierce critic of the idea of decoloniality. But I've always maintained that he already has a decolonial mind, he already has a decolonial outlook towards things, therefore he does not see the need for a theory called decoloniality being propagated or written about or talked about as Sai Deepak does. And how does that decoloniality come about? Because lo and behold, Kushal Mehra's parents are right-wingers who have been lifelong BJP voters. He has said this himself. Kushal Mehra says stuff like Angrez chale gaye, Angreziyat nahi gayi. Epistemic resistance bahut zaruri hai. If this isn't decoloniality, what is? But he somehow thinks that he is above decoloniality because he is for individualism, individual rights. And I have countered him on 2 or 3 separate videos that theoretical individualism only works. It works in places like France and USA because collectively and individually people do similar things. For example, in USA to be specific, which may be considered a bastion for individual rights, there individually people do the same kinds of things. They go on a hunt, they love steak, they fly an American flag in front of their house. All of them believe in free speech. They even allow flag burning, etc. But it's all of them doing and agreeing upon the same things. So they are believing in a grand framework inside which you can play according to your own rules. But even that does not become a problem because their own rules are never really contradicting with the larger framework or the larger narrative or rule. Because when someone does play against the rules of the larger narrative, we know what happens to them. People disappear, people live in Russia, hoping to come back to USA someday. CIA makes them disappear and things like that. But you see, the unit, the singular person, the individual cannot come, his existence cannot be at the cost of the whole, and the whole's existence should not be at the cost of the individual. Because then we become Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. That's not what I'm ever gonna defend or recommend. But what I was thinking about is, what is individuality's place or value in a Hindu civilization or a Hindu society? And it's probably funny to make a video and talk about things on which you consciously know that you are undereducated, but that's something I'm going to do today, and hence I'll hope to have a discussion in the comment section about this. But I can see a value for individuality inside a superstructure of dharma, Hinduism, Sanatan Dharma, etc. And the example I'm looking at might not be everything, might not be a bombshell of an example. It would be unfair of me to show this example and say that, see, I have disproven that decoloniality is opposed to individuality, or Hinduism is opposed to individuality. I have debunked that completely. It's not that strong of an argument, but it's not nothing. It is a pretty significant example. Why do we have Isht Devatas? We have a Grama Devata, we have a concept of a Kula Devata, and then, at the end of the day, an Isht Devata as well. Why is that? And that's something to think about. These 3 tiers of personal connections to the divine exemplifies Hinduism's, the Sanatan Dharma's acceptance of both group rights and individual rights, in my opinion, because at the end of the day you have to strike a balance, because you can't afford to become Pakistan, nor can you afford to become USA of today. I would hate to have that. And also it's important to point out that how has Hindu individualism affected Hindus in India? We were happy being individualists. We were not giving any attention to Hindu group identity, group rights. Someone else who believes in group rights, someone who does not believe in individual rights at all, taking advantage of us. And we cannot let that happen. Nor does it mean that we go around saying that Narendra Modi is the best thing that can happen to India and just let's keep voting for BJP regardless of what they do and regardless of what they don't do from here to eternity, and everything will be alright. No one has the right to say anything against BJP, etc. That's the so-called Hindu Taliban, so to speak. We cannot have any of these 2 options, right? So both individualists and group rights people will agree that there is a need for a middle path and a balance. And coincidentally, when I was thinking about all these things, I was listening to an interview taken by Jordan Peterson of a person who is a professor of military history and military studies. There, Jordan Peterson, who is usually known as a big individualism guy, he ends up saying something interesting which you will notice is 100% in accordance with whatever the decolonial perspective for Hindus would be in India. First, let's listen to that.
They were able to give a person a whole reference of knowledge, pragmatic sense the humanities were able to do. So that was some.
So here this person is talking about what the value of a humanities education used to be.
Some of the things in a more pragmatic sense the humanities were able to do. They were able to give a person a whole reference of knowledge so that they didn't have to live out and learn something by rote or by. They had an example. And the other thing is it gave them a sense of
having an example, not having to reinvent the wheel. And see how Jordan Peterson jumps in and says that this is absolutely necessary. This is not an option.
That's not optional. That's not optional for human beings. I mean, we are linguistic creatures and we require an awful lot of cultural programming.
I think we do.
Cultural programming.
Every culture knows that. And so we're definitely in the situation where if we don't inculcate the wisdom of the past into our young people, then they are forced to regenerate that wisdom through painful and often fatal experience.
Can you believe what he's just said? How is this different from anything Hindus are saying in India? We liberal Hindus, urban Hindus have given up our collective cultural, historical wisdom that has led to the degradation of Hindu practices, Hindu wisdom, Hindu knowledge, everything. More important than that, not only has it just degraded us, it has created a force strong enough to devour Hinduism and Hindus anytime they want or sometime in the near future. It's only now the resistance is beginning. And that's what I wanted to mainly say, that what people don't get about decoloniality is that decoloniality is going to be different in different places. Decoloniality is not a universally correct claim of things like post-colonialism or postmodernism. Even postmodernism is a critique of whatever happened in the 20th century. In decoloniality, there's the element of pre-colonialism, the pre-colonial past. And that's where this collective wisdom inculcating the knowledge of that culture but devoid of the colonial distortions, that's where decoloniality comes in. As a Hindu society, we need to have some non-negotiables. As Hindu nationalists, so to speak. One of them is obviously that whatever the territory is today, that is sacrosanct, that is not subject to local plebiscites. Another is freeing up of Hindu temples. Now, after you have these policies in place in a majorly Hindu society that behaves Hindu, inside that Hindu society, I could warn people, I could claim that no, Hindus are never going to become Taliban-esque in any way. But even if someone says that no, I cannot trust you on your words, even then I could go ahead and say that after we have those non-negotiables in place, there is room for dialogue, discussion, individual characteristics coming to the forefront, etc. But the framework needs to be protected at all costs. Individuality cannot survive without other individuals. Individuals survive inside a framework. We are talking about saving the framework. The idea of India, according to me, is the idea of dharma. Idea of Sanatan Dharma, idea of India, idea of Hinduism, all of those are synonymous. I'm simply paraphrasing Aurobindo here when he had said in the last 2 lines of the Uttarpada speech, he had said, for us the Sanatan Dharma is nationalism. I'm talking in those lines. Let's say you sit down to play chess with someone, that means you are already agreeing upon the rules of the game. Inside that game, you can have your personal style, but you cannot suddenly punch the chessboard, destroy the board, make the chess pieces fly away and say, see, I was introducing a new rule, I was being an individualist. No, some things as a group are non-negotiable. That does not mean all individual thinking, intellect, behaviors, personal traits go to hell, but it also does not mean there's no room for an inculcation of pre-colonial wisdoms, living in accordance to one's own cultural practices, one's own group's cultural practices, devoid of colonial distortions. And more than everything, the most important tool that decoloniality gives here is the lens to observe yourself and the world without the distortions of coloniality, without the distortions of colonialism. Forget your personal practices, forget the policy position, they come later. First step is to think about things. The thinking part has to be devoid of colonial presumptions. You cannot end up agreeing with colonialists on everything, then claim pro-Hindu or pro-India. I mean, you can claim to be anything you want, but you won't be truthful in that claim. You are not going to be right. You are a liar if you say those things. Now, that does not also mean that you disagree with anything any white person has ever said about Hinduism and India just to show off how decolonial you are. That's also a mistake a lot of people make. Because at the end of the day, I'm not a racist. I don't think it's possible for people of one race or religion to be correct or incorrect on everything, or correct or incorrect about a culture every time. So obviously there will be some white people who are correct about Hinduism, both in pointing out its mistakes and its achievements. But whether you agree or disagree with that claim by a non-Indian or a non-Hindu, your judgment of that claim should not be based on his lenses. That has to be based on your lenses. To conclude, decoloniality is about saving the framework inside which individuality can flourish.
Jaya Jaya